I'm Cruz Devon with This Gay Life, and today we have guests with us. We're going to be talking about gay parenting, and before we go ahead and introduce the guest, there's a little something I wanted to say, and it's kind of a pre-introduction. One of the things that we had to do with this show is we have a parent on the show that the kids are all grown and they've left the house and everything. And one of the reasons we had to do this is really not, well, I can't say fear, that's kind of a strict word, but I just wanted to say that we really didn't want to have somebody on the show that the possibility that their children could be taken away from them because they were gay. And that is one of the reasons why we have a parent on the show that the children are grown. And I just wanted to clarify that. If you need more information about that, why don't you give us a call later? There'll be an address and some information and a telephone number you can call us. Right now I'd like to go ahead and introduce my guests. Over here we have Blaize Malone. She's a lesbian mother of 5. And we have Deborah Larson. She's a communications lecturer at SMSU. And first I'd like to welcome you both. And Blaize, that's quite a feat to be a mother of 5, let alone a single mother, and let alone a lesbian single mother. That's quite a feat.
Well, I was married
there.
2 times. I was married for part of the time.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Well, I have 5 children. They're adults now. They are ages 25 to 37, almost 38. I have 5 grandchildren. I didn't come out to my children until after they were of an age where it didn't matter much. 4 of my children are the offspring of my first husband, and I was not sure how he would react. Once they were pretty close to adulthood, and I only had my 5th child at home and young. She was an adolescent at the time. I knew my second husband wouldn't try to take her away. I knew that he would be cool about it because we had always had gay friends, and so then I felt safe to come out to them. And I did, and they were very accepting. In fact, a couple of them said, "Gee, Mom, it's about time." But I've never had any problems with them. I think we have very good communication. As it turns out, I think both my ex-husbands accept me. I think their wives were a little bit less accepting, but I think, I don't know why, but I think we've worked it out. And
well, you said that your children all take it very well, and they're just very supportive and stuff. We have some pictures here of the children, and if you'll just go ahead and kind of name them off. I don't know, can you see this? Can you pick this up? There we go.
Carrie, she's my youngest.
Okay, and then over here we have
Jay.
He's a good-looking guy. They all are good-looking children.
Beth.
And here's one. I love this picture too. This is really great.
Lynn and Davi.
And Davi. And
and Kurt and Lyndall May.
And Kurt. And then down here we have a younger, or an older picture of the family.
This is what it was like when it started. No, the other one.
That's the marriage one.
That's the last time most of them were together, and this was at Jay's wedding.
Okay.
What year was that?
Can you get
that was about a year and a half ago.
This one right there.
2 years ago, I guess. Whoops.
Right there, yeah.
That's me and all 5 of them when they were young.
There's a lot of us that have pictures that look like that.
Where are you, Blaize?
We're at the Los Angeles Zoo.
Hey, in fact, I've got a picture like that. Anyway, when you, what were your fears on telling your children? I mean,
I didn't have any fears telling my children. I had much more fear from friends, neighbors, and I wasn't sure how my first husband would react, but actually, he did react all right.
Did anybody have a fit or anything? Nobody just kind of...
No. The youngest, Carrie, as I said, was an adolescent at the time, and I think she had more problems with it than anybody else, but I think that's true of adolescent children.
How did, like, parents and teachers, I mean, and friends of your children, was there any problem there? Did they give
No,
you
I
any
think everybody's
feedback?
been very accepting.
You said something about that you were living in a place where there was a lot of film people.
Well, I lived up in Northern California and I lived in Southern California, and I think that the people that were living in the area were more accepting of alternative lifestyles. They were just more open people.
Mm. And you mentioned going to a few parties and stuff like that, and I guess this was before you decided to come out.
Well, no. When I was married to Charlie, my second husband, we had a fair number of gay friends. We used to go to parties at their houses, and then when I lived in Malibu Lake, the man who rented our guest cottage was a film editor, and he was gay. And I think actually my two daughters were the older daughters were they were 15 and 16 or so when Chris was living with us, and Jay was younger, and you know, they had a crush on him, and I said, well, you know, that Chris is gay. And they said, no. And Jay was upset because, you know, he just admired Chris so much, and it turned out that, you know, that worked out too. And Chris, I think when my oldest daughter got a family album together, it wasn't just us, it was Chris too, because I think they considered Chris to be their older brother, and I considered Chris to be our younger brother. And I think he really helped us with communication. He helped keep us honest with each other when they were teenagers.
Was there any like groups for gay parents at the time?
No.
Not at all. Because I know there's a group now. It's Parents and Friends of Gays, PFLAG, and we'll be giving some information about that later. But I mean, as far as like regular organizations like PTA and stuff like that, were you part of that?
No, well, this was 20 years ago. And, you know, there wasn't anything like that at this time. I mean, I was very fortunate in that I had very accepting friends.
Mm. That's really good. Well, Debbie, you did your thesis on gay parenting.
That's right.
And communications within the family. And what did you find? I mean,
Well, I was interested in looking at basically three different things. And first of all, I was interested in how parents disclose their sexuality to their children. Were there different techniques or strategies that they used in order to make it go better? Another thing I looked at was the pattern of communication, or how gays and lesbians and their children both view the communication within the family. Did they see things similarly or differently? And finally, the last thing I looked at were basically what were the benefits that kids felt like they had growing up in a gay parented household. So those three things are what I was basically looking at. And I guess I did find some differences when it came to disclosing their sexuality. And I don't know, Blaize, I think, can probably tell me this is probably true in her case, that the difference was not so much in how the children were told, which I call the techniques, but in the approach taken to telling the child. And that seemed very similar, but I call that the strategy. And what I basically found were that women were, in general, very proactive with their disclosure. In other words, they didn't try to hide it. They were very open. They let their kids ask questions, or they sat down with them at a particular time to tell them. It wasn't generally precipitated by a crisis or something like that, and they generally always tried to be the first one to tell their children so that nobody else could get in any kind of licks or something like that, whereas men were much more reactive in what they tried to do with their kids. Not all of my sample, but for the most part, all of my men didn't want to tell, would hide longer or as much as possible, let other people tell. Might be easier that way. Or there was typically a crisis situation like a divorce or breakup that they had been hiding, and they were visibly upset and their kids were worried about them, something like that, and so that they had to end up sitting down and telling their kids. Or they just, like I said before, let someone else do it. Or maybe they didn't want someone else to do it, but grandparents or an ex-spouse got there first. And so I typically found that with those two types of strategies, in general, always, I should say, the proactive strategy of being honest and open and forward was much better than the reactive strategy, and the only negatives I got from the kids were with reactive strategies.
When you came out to your kids, I mean, did you have to think about it a long time? Were you?
No, it was like,
It just-
you know, something
time.
important had happened in my life, and it was a big change in my life, and they were the people I wanted to share it with immediately.
Well, that's really great.
And they were happy for me.
Proactive then.
Very proactive. And you said the only child that really had a problem with was your adolescent.
Right.
And maybe it wasn't a real big problem.
No, it
but
wasn't a
just-
terribly big problem, but there were. It was, let's say, there was absolutely no problem from the other children, and they were, in fact, you know, enthusiastically accepting. The adolescent wasn't quite sure what to think about it, but I think it's because adolescents are going through their own sexual identity crises.
Yeah, that's typically what I found with my study, and other people who have also studied the disclosure from parents to their children, is that as with any adolescent, they are having their own problems, their own identity problems, their own sexual identity problems, and it's just one other thing that they have to deal with, and so that's typically when kids have the most problem with it. And even in my study, I found out that the kids were told beforehand who didn't have a problem with it, while they were going through their own sexual identity things, had some problems with their parents. Not all of them, but some of them did. And then after they got to be like 17 or 18 years old, they were fine with it again. And so I think that that's a real typical thing to have happen.
Does this type of thing happen with other things like divorce and stuff too? Do you know
What?
that adolescents react worse?
Yes, of course it does. Of course it does.
It's just that tumultuous time in one's life.
Well, right. You know, my mom always said if we could shut the kids up between put them in a closet between 12 and 18, we'd have them made.
It wasn't that long. It was about 2 years,
Well, I
two and
guess
a
my
half years
brother and I were
each.
difficult. I don't know.
Well, what I'm kind of wondering is that, did you have any control group with like straight people? Because I can't imagine a straight couple saying, "Yes, kids, we're straight," you know. And
No, because I wasn't looking at them in particular. I was looking for the, you know, the gay groups and,
Yeah.
and how they handled it, because I think that everybody pretty much has a premonition of how heterosexual families handle like sex talks and things like that, which, and in my case, like I said, I looked at the communication and how parents and children both perceive. And this was kind of new to a study, because typically what's been done is that parents were interviewed and children were not, because of age, because of parents being very protective about their children, not wanting them to be hurt or have to deal with this if they didn't feel like it and that. So I had to look for a sample body that also had children who were basically old enough to understand what was going on and, you know, into adulthood. And I think my youngest was like 8. And that was from a lesbian parented household. And so he had always known that his mom was gay and, you know, different than other people's moms and fathers. So, but do you have a question?
Yeah, that makes me wonder about my grandchildren. Actually, my oldest granddaughter is approaching adolescence, but all my grandchildren have known that I was a lesbian from the time they were first able to perceive something like that. They always knew I was involved.
what age is that they can perceive?
Well, they just knew that I was with a woman, and you know that was their perception, and you know they knew that I loved the woman I was with, and they were just totally unquestioning about it. And this has made me wonder whether they're going to experience something in adolescence.
Oh, I don't know. You know, as long as they've known it. The only thing I can say is that probably just the typical adolescent problems are the only things that bring up problems. And I wouldn't imagine that they would have a problem with it. Besides that, your grandma. And that's different than mom and dad,
That's
am
true.
I right?
It's true, they don't fight with me the way they do with their own parents.
Exactly. But I do have to say that the communication patterns within the family and how they were both perceived by parent and children were very similar, and that they both said they were very open. Some of the families said that they would they became more open after the disclosure because of honesty and trust from the parent. Therefore, the children felt that they could honestly communicate with their parent, and that the trust was laid on the line, and so that they could trust their parent not to be judgmental about them,
Right.
since they hadn't been judgmental about their parent. And so that was one thing I found out, and the other thing was that all of them said that they felt like their communication was more open than a heterosexual family because of those two basic things, in dealing with topics that maybe heterosexual parents aren't comfortable with talking about: homosexuality, AIDS, disease, death, because a lot of people have experienced death of close friends with the AIDS epidemic. So I mean, there are a lot of things that gay parents and children do communicate about that heterosexual families don't. And I'm not saying they don't, but at least my sample population felt very comfortable talking about
I think it's more
those things.
usual, and I think that it is really good for the children, because I know as teenagers, my children felt they felt at ease to ask me about anything or to tell me anything. And I think, if I think of my childhood, one of the most difficult things was wondering what I could share and what I couldn't share.
Yeah, I think that's a real
So there
typical
wasn't
reaction.
Well, I think something, well, you would think, would be resentment because of your family being different in some way. That may have just to do with the way something is communicated versus the actual environment. I'm not sure. I'm just
Resentment on the child's part?
Yeah, the child resenting that his home was different than, say, House A.
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that, but there again, typically I found that with my adolescents in my sample population. Just that it was a little bit different. But from what my kids said in the study was that the benefits far outweighed the downside of having a gay parent.
Did they have specific benefits that they named almost across the board, or?
Well, the biggest benefits they said was basically that they grew up non-prejudicial and very open-minded about other people's, whether it be their sexuality, their race, their lifestyle. Whatever their lifestyle might be, whether it's very religious to somebody who didn't go to church at all, or something like that. And they didn't judge people for the groups that they belonged to or the minority that they were in, but that they looked at them as individual people and decided on that fact alone whether they liked them, wanted to be around them, or didn't.
And Blaize, you said your kids are just, really great and as open-minded.
Yeah, and I think one of the benefits, because of the openness, because we were, even when I was married, before I accepted the fact that I was a lesbian, we had gay friends, we had black friends, we had all kinds of friends, from very straight engineers to people at the opposite end of the spectrum, and so the house was pervaded by openness. And one of the advantages my children had, I think, was that our house was the hangout. I mean, all the kids in the neighborhood felt free to come over and spend time at our house because
cool.
this was
This
was the house where they could be themselves, where they didn't have to worry about acting or what they could say. I mean, they could be themselves, and my house was always filled with teenagers.
Did you ever get anything when you were interviewing the kids? I mean, especially with the older ones. Was there a trend to be more artistic, less artistic, more expressive, less expressive, or didn't you get into that?
I didn't really get into that a whole lot. Something to think about, though, on future studies.
We were talking about this the other night, about it seemed that a lot of people in the artistic field seem to be gay or very open or changing lifestyles. And I just kind of wondered, well, maybe you'd seen an inkling of this at the very beginning. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. My children run the gamut. I mean,
Really?
and I feel proud of that because I think it means I let them be themselves. But my oldest, he works as little as he can, but he he owns 5 rental properties at this time. Well, he wants to spend time with his children, and he wants to have time to walk in the woods. And one of my daughters is a nurse, another is a massage therapist. She does neuromuscular reprogramming, and she's a chef. She's also a chef, and she does catering. And one of my sons is a contractor and woodworker, and but they run the gamut.
If anybody has any other questions about gay parenting, one of the sources that we found, we just kind of ran down to the local library and we picked up this book, Lesbian and Gay Parenting Handbook. I haven't had a chance to read it yet because we just got it the other day, but there are resources, there are resources available, and I'm sure there's other books. That's just the one that kind of jumped at us when we first went to the library. There is PFLAG, which is an organization which we don't necessarily have put together yet in this area, but we would really like to do that. So if you're interested in joining, or if you would like to maybe spearhead that effort, we could really use your participation, and we'll be giving you an address and a telephone number later on in the show. And if you could call that or send us a letter, we'll be sure and pass on the information we have on this particular group. It's Parents and Friends of Gays, and it's been a very helpful group in a lot of other areas that I've visited, and in a couple of areas that I've lived in. They've just been a wonderful, supportive group, and if your parents are asking you questions, or if your friends are asking you questions, you're trying to figure out how to tell them or whatever. When you were first coming out, Blaize, to your children and your friends, you say you didn't have much of a problem, although I do understand that some people feel very intimidated about the possibility of rejection if they happen to tell their friends.
Well, I think you worry about that, but
yeah.
I think as I said, I was very fortunate.
Yeah, and having some very supportive friends. It'd be nice if everybody had that.
That's true.
Did that play a part in your research? I mean, with the families and stuff, did they seem to all have a real good support group for them?
Yeah, not everybody did, but typically most of my sample population's parents and friends were very supportive of them, and there was only, I think, like 20% of my population that had some problem disclosing the information to their children, and it typically had to do with grandparents or their parents who had opposite views of what should be going on. And there again, at least one of my sample population ended up in court over her children, which was a very unfortunate situation.
Ew.
So it is true that does happen, and it is a shame, because, and I'll just want to say this, because research has found that kids who grow up in households parented by homosexuals are not molested. They are very well-adjusted people, as I'm sure Blaize can attest to, and all around they just seem to be very well-rounded individuals. Like I said, they're not prejudiced, and they don't have a problem typically with their parents at all.
You mentioned something about someone trying to take custody. Here's a little clipping from the news leader. This is a quote. It says, "Missouri is the only other state whose courts have taken the position that homosexuality is reason enough to rule a parent unfit." And we haven't got any specific information about this. If you happen to have any, we would be really grateful if you could send it to us. Or if you happen to be a lawyer and would like to talk about that, we'd love to have you on the show. And basically...
I take issue with that.
I do too.
I mean, I've been pretty politically active through the bias crimes ordinance fight. And, and I've heard us described as unfit parents over and over again. And I happen to know that one of the people who said that has a wife that's been in and out of mental institutions and has a son who has severe emotional problems. And I think he should clean up his own house before he starts calling us unfit just because of who we are. I mean, I've nurtured 5 children to adulthood, and they've all grown up to be fine people. I am proud of them. I really am. And they're proud of me. I had 3 of them who live in the area tell me that they were so proud of me because I was out and I was fighting for what I believed in. And I really resent someone calling me an unfit parent.
I don't understand where that argument comes from, because research also says that 90% of the children that grow up in homosexual households turn out to be heterosexual anyway.
All 5 of mine are.
That's right. And so
I had to adopt one of my co-director as a child just because I needed a gay child too. His name is David.
Okay, well, we got a little bit of time just left on the show, and I need to go over some announcements and stuff like that right now. And first off, it's a little announcement for Cohab that we didn't get into the newsletter. And it's, if anybody has any tapes, or like if you happen to videotape the news broadcasts before or after the vote of the bias crime ordinance, it would be really great if you could get in touch with us. And if you go get yourself a pencil and a paper right now, just think by the time you get back to your seat, you'll actually be able to write down this address and telephone number. Also, I wanted to share with you, we finally got some mail. This is really great. And we only got, I think this is something, we only got one piece of quote-unquote hate mail. And I kind of wanted to share it with everybody. It's what homosexuals do. And I really appreciate you sending this to me, but I think I already know. But I'll tell you what, the next homosexual I'll see, I'll pass it on. And let's see, there's a contest going on. We're still having our logo contest. And if you have an idea for This Gay Life and how to present it, I think that would be really great if you would send it in to us. And yes, we're going to give you the address in just a moment. Also, if you would like to help us in any way, shape, or form, and one of the ways you could is by sending in little clippings of articles or something you've collected of news and stuff, because we'd like to start doing news on the program. And or if you'd like to just have some sort of support, give us a call. Any way that is, whether that's with your time or if you'd like to help financially, go ahead and give us a call at this number that we're going to give you. We'd like to thank Cohab for their continued support. They've helped me in so many ways. I can't go on about it because I haven't got enough time. I haven't got a day and a half. So also next week is going to be a really great show. It's going to be on coming out. We're going to have 3 individuals, and they all have varying different stories about coming out here in the area. And I know you won't want to miss that. Once again, I guess we're coming up on the time for the post office box and all that. So if they want to go ahead and show that, it's This Gay Life, P.O. Box 1434, Springfield, Missouri, 65801, and the phone number is 888-6927. Just go ahead and call and leave us a message, and we'll get back with you as soon as possible. And remember, that's for everything from if you have the tapes from the news broadcasts, or if you want to go ahead and send in a logo for the contest. We got so many things going on here, so you got to keep watching every week, because we add something every week. So you're just going to have to keep watching, okay? Also, if you want to help us in any way, shape, or form, because we really could use some help. We've had a lot of offers. That's the other thing I wanted to let you know, is just we've had such an outpouring of support of people saying, way to go, this is such a great project. And I wish I had time to actually read some letters. If you send us a letter, let us know if you want us, if we can read it on the air, if we can say your name, because that would, that way we can share a little bit of, notoriety with you. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure and watch next week. Remember, we're going to have the show on coming out. I'm Cruz Devon, and that's This Gay Life. Thanks for joining us.